The smile that healed me, even when the world fell apart. The waiting room of São Paulo University Hospital smelled of disinfectant and fear. Yuna Kim clutched the brown envelope with trembling hands, the test results finally in her fingers, after 3 weeks of anxiety gnawing at her stomach. At 32, she had always prided herself on her impeccable health, her morning running routine, her carefully prepared salads. But the unexplained fatigue, persistent abdominal pain, and weight loss had forced her best friend Camilla to literally drag her here. When the doctor called her name, Yuna rose slowly, feeling the weight of something terrible about to materialize. Dr. Daniel Choi had kind eyes behind thin-framed glasses, black hair slightly disheveled as if he'd run his hand through it many times that morning. He couldn't be more than 35, but there was a seriousness in his face that aged him. "Mrs. Kim, please, sit down." His voice was soft but firm. Yuna noticed he didn't smile, and her heart plummeted. "Your tests show a condition we need to treat urgently. You have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in its early stages. It's a type of cancer that affects the lymphatic system." The word cancer exploded in her mind like a firecracker. Yuna heard her own breathing accelerate, saw his hands moving over papers she could no longer focus on, heard words like chemotherapy, favorable prognosis, remission rate. But everything seemed distant, as if she were submerged in icy water. "I know it's scary," Daniel said, leaning slightly forward. "But I want you to know that I'm here. We're going to get through this together, step by step. You're not alone." There was something in the way he said it, a conviction that didn't seem merely professional, that made Yuna finally look directly at him. And for the first time in years, she felt that someone truly saw her. That night, Yuna sat at the empty dining table of her apartment in Pinheiros, phone in her hands. She should call Junho, her husband. He'd been in Curitiba for 2 weeks, another business trip extending indefinitely. In the last 3 years of marriage, the trips had become more frequent, the calls shorter, affection a distant memory. They didn't fight. There was no infidelity or cruelty, just a cold indifference that had settled in like mold on the walls of a relationship that should never have happened. She dialed. Junho answered on the 5th ring, his voice impatient with traffic noise in the background. "Yuna, I'm kind of busy right now. Can this be quick? I got my test results." She tried to keep her voice steady. "I have cancer. Lymphoma. I'm starting chemotherapy next week." Silence. Then, "That's news, Yuna. Is that serious?" There was surprise there, but not the desperation, not the urgency she secretly hoped for. "Look, I'll try to get back soon, but I have meetings until Thursday. Did you talk to a good doctor? Do you have someone with you?" Something inside her broke in that moment, but it was a crack in something that had already been broken for a long time. "Yes, I have a doctor. Don't worry, Junho. Continue with your meetings." She hung up before he could respond, and the tears that fell weren't from sadness about the disease, but from the loneliness that had been consuming her for years. The first chemotherapy session was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday. Yuna arrived alone, carrying a bag with a book she knew she wouldn't be able to read, headphones, and a water bottle. The infusion room was surprisingly welcoming, with light blue recliners and large windows overlooking an interior garden. Other people were already there, some with companions, others alone like her, all connected to IV bags dripping slowly. Daniel appeared before the nurse began preparing the venous access. "I came to see how you're doing." He pulled up a chair and sat beside her, not as a doctor maintaining professional distance, but as someone who genuinely cared. "First day is always the hardest. How did you sleep?" "Badly," Yuna admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "I kept imagining how my body will react. Whether I'll lose my hair, whether I'll be able to keep working." She was a freelance graphic designer, worked from home, but even so, the uncertainty terrified her. "You'll probably lose your hair, yes," Daniel said gently, not softening the truth. "But it will grow back, and about working will adjust as your body responds. Some days will be bad, others better. But Yuna," he waited until she looked at him. "You're stronger than you imagine. I've already seen that in you." "How can you say that?" Her voice came out harsher than intended. You barely know me. I know enough. Daniel smiled, and it was as if the sun had broken through the gray clouds outside. You came alone today, even though you're scared. That's courage. During the following hours, as the medication entered her veins, Daniel passed by 3 times to check on her. The 3rd time, he brought hot chocolate from the hospital cafe. Don't tell the nutritionist, he whispered conspiratorially, and Yuna laughed for the first time in weeks. The weeks turned into months, and chemotherapy became Yuna's brutal new routine. There were days when she could barely get out of bed, her body heavy as lead, constant nausea making even the thought of food revolting. Her hair began falling out in handfuls in the shower, and she cried for the first time since the diagnosis, not because of the disease, but because of losing something she'd always considered part of her identity. It was Camilla who took her to shave her head completely. Better to control the situation than watch it slip out of control, her friend said with practical firmness, holding her hand while the hairdresser ran the clippers. Yuna looked at her reflection in the mirror, her head smooth and exposed, and felt simultaneously vulnerable and strangely free. Junho returned to São Paulo only once during the first 2 months of treatment, staying 3 days before leaving again. He was uncomfortable seeing her without hair, avoiding looking directly at her, and when he finally mentioned it, it was only to say, "You can wear pretty scarves. I saw some women doing that online." There were no prolonged hugs, no conversations about fear or hope. He slept in the guest room, claiming he didn't want to disturb her in case she needed rest. The morning he left again, Yuna realized she felt neither anger nor sadness, just a resigned emptiness, the realization that she was facing the hardest battle of her life alongside a stranger who shared her surname. Daniel, on the other hand, had become a comforting constant. He always appeared during her sessions, even when it wasn't necessary, bringing small things, a book of Korean poetry he thought she'd like, packages of ginger cookies to help with nausea, even a soft wool beanie on a particularly cold day. "My sister made it," he explained, placing it gently on her head. "She survived breast cancer 5 years ago. She wanted you to have this. Why do you do this?" Yuna asked on a particularly difficult afternoon when the side effects left her too exhausted to pretend she was okay. "Why do you care so much? You must have dozens of patients." Daniel was silent for a long moment, his hands resting loosely on his knees as he sat beside her infusion chair. "I do, yes, and I care about all of them. But you?" He hesitated, and Yuna saw something pass across his face, a vulnerability he quickly tried to hide. "You remind me why I chose this profession. I see how you fight, how you show up even when you're exhausted, how you smile at the nurses even on your worst days. You inspire me." Something changed in that moment, an invisible thread stretching between them. Yuna felt her heart race, not from fear of the disease, but from something she shouldn't be feeling. Not now, not for him. She was married. He was her doctor. But when her eyes met his, she saw the same recognition, the same awareness that something was growing between them that they shouldn't allow. "Daniel," she began but didn't know what to say. He stood quickly, recomposing his professional mask. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. I'll send the nurse to check your access." And he left before she could respond, leaving her confused, and for the first time in a long while, feeling something beyond pain and fear. In the following days, Daniel kept his distance. He still checked her tests, still adjusted her treatment, but the casual visits ceased. Yuna felt the absence like a physical pain, and hated herself for it. What kind of person was she, developing feelings for another man while still technically married? But then she remembered the lonely nights, Junho's unreturned calls, the way he looked at her now when he saw her, as if she were a problem to be managed, not a person to be loved. It was during her 10th chemotherapy session that everything fell apart. Yuna had a severe reaction to the medication, her body convulsing, blood pressure dropping dangerously. Nurses rushed, alarms sounded, and through the fog of fear and pain, she heard Daniel's voice, firm and urgent, giving orders, his hands holding hers. "Stay with me, Yuna. Look at me. Breathe with me." His eyes were all she could focus on, anchors in a storm. "You're going to be okay. I promise. Just keep looking at me." When they finally stabilized her and moved her to an observation room, Yuna was too exhausted to protest when Daniel refused to leave her alone. He pulled a chair beside her bed and simply stayed there, monitoring her vital signs, checking her IV access, adjusting her blanket. "You should go home," Yuna murmured, her voice hoarse. "I'm sure you have other patients, a life. I'm exactly where I need to be." The intensity in his voice made her open her eyes completely. Daniel was looking at her with an expression so raw, so unguarded, that it took away what little breath she had left. "When you started convulsing, I thought I was going to lose you. And I realized I can't pretend anymore that you're just another patient to me. Daniel, I'm married." The words came out automatically, a weak defense against something that had already happened. "I know." He ran his hand through his hair, frustration and anguish competing in his face. "Believe me, I know. And I know this is completely unethical, that I'm violating every professional rule. But I need to ask Yuna, when was the last time your husband was here? When was the last time he held your hand or asked you how you were feeling?" The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable. "He doesn't care, Daniel. I don't think he's cared for a long time. But that doesn't change the fact that we're still married, that I still wear his ring." She looked at the gold band on her finger, so familiar she didn't even feel it anymore. Daniel reached for her hand delicately, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. Yuna didn't pull back. "I'm not asking you to make a decision now. I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know that you're not alone. That someone sees you, all of you, and finds you absolutely extraordinary." They stayed like that for hours, hands intertwined, saying nothing but saying everything. And when Yuna finally fell asleep, it was the first peaceful sleep she'd had in months. The conversation with Junho was inevitable, but Yuna postponed it for weeks, struggling with guilt and confusion. What did she really want? A divorce because of her feelings for Daniel, or a divorce because her marriage had already been dead for years? And did the difference matter? It was Camilla who finally confronted her during a light lunch at Yuna's apartment. "You need to be honest with him, Yuna, and more importantly, you need to be honest with yourself. You're clinging to this marriage, why? Because you love Junho or because you're afraid of being alone?" "I don't know if I ever loved Junho the way I should have," Yuna admitted, the words coming out like a painful confession. "Our parents were friends, it made sense at the time, he was stable and respectable. But there was never passion, never that feeling of being with the right person. And when I got sick, when I really needed him," her voice failed. "He just wasn't there. And Daniel?" Yuna closed her eyes, his image immediately filling her mind. The way he smiled when she made a bad joke, how he patiently explained each step of treatment, how he showed up at 11 at night once because she sent a message saying she was too scared to sleep. Daniel makes me feel alive. Even now, even sick and bald and afraid. He makes me want to fight, want to survive. Then you know what you need to do." Junho arrived in São Paulo on a Saturday afternoon, irritated at being summoned. "Couldn't this wait until I came back naturally? I have an important project going on." They sat in the living room, the same room where they'd celebrated their wedding 3 years earlier with a small dinner for family. It seemed like a lifetime ago. Yuna looked at the man across from her, noticing for the first time how they were strangers to each other. She didn't know his favorite food, didn't know what made him laugh, didn't know his fears or dreams. "I want a divorce, Junho," she said simply without beating around the bush. He blinked, genuinely surprised. "Because of the cancer? Yuna, I know I haven't been as present as I should be, but that doesn't mean I want to end the marriage. I'm just dealing with this in my own way." "It's not because of the cancer," Yuna replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "It's because you don't love me, and I don't love you. We're two strangers sharing a surname. And life is too short, Junho. I learned that the hard way. I don't want to spend what I have left pretending." There was a long silence. Then, to her surprise, Junho nodded slowly. "You're right. I knew, I guess. Just didn't have the courage to admit it. He looked at her with something like relief. Is there someone else for you? Yuna thought about lying, but decided they'd already lied to each other long enough. There's someone who makes me feel like I should feel. But that's not why I want the divorce. I want it because I deserve more. We both deserve more. The divorce process was surprisingly amicable. No children, no shared properties beyond the apartment that Junho agreed to leave to her. Everything was resolved in 2 months. Yuna's parents were disappointed, but she didn't care. For the first time in years, she was making decisions for herself, living for herself. During this time, Daniel maintained professional distance, though Yuna could see the unasked question in his eyes whenever they met. She said nothing, focusing on her treatment, which was progressing well. Tests showed the tumor was shrinking, her body responding to chemotherapy better than expected. It was after her last chemotherapy session, on a sunny spring day with the hospital garden exploding in colors, that Yuna finally sought out Daniel. She found him in his office, reviewing medical records, and knocked gently on the open door. He looked up, and she saw the exact moment he noticed the absence of the ring on her finger. Yuna. Can I come in? Daniel nodded, standing, tension clear in every line of his body. How are you feeling? The last session was over. Yuna interrupted gently. The treatment is over, and my marriage is over too. The divorce was finalized yesterday. He froze. Yuna, if you did this because of me, if you felt any pressure. It wasn't because of you, she said, moving closer. It was for me, because I deserved more than an empty marriage. Because I deserved someone who saw me, who cared, who showed up. She stopped in front of him, so close she could see the golden flecks in his brown eyes. But now that I'm free, now that I'm healed, I can finally ask, do you still feel the same? Daniel didn't answer with words. Instead, he raised his hands, holding her face with such tenderness she thought she might come undone, and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, reverent, full of all the months of waiting, of hope, of fear that this could never happen. Yuna felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in a year, they were tears of joy. I love you, Daniel whispered against her lips. I know it's too fast. I know I violated every professional rule by falling in love with my patient. But I can't pretend anymore. I love you, Yuna. You healed me, she replied, laughing and crying at the same time. And I'm not just talking about the cancer. You healed me from believing I didn't deserve more. I love you too, Daniel. I love you so much. 6 months later, Yuna was in complete remission. Her hair had grown back in soft, short curls that she loved. She and Daniel were in a public relationship now, having carefully navigated the doctor-patient ethics by officially transferring her care to another oncologist at the hospital. The administration wasn't happy, but they couldn't deny that the treatment had been exemplary and that both were consenting adults. They were in the same hospital garden where Yuna had spent so many hours during chemotherapy, but now she was healthy, strong, alive. Daniel held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, Yuna said, resting her head on his shoulder. That I survived, that I found you, that I'm happy. Believe it, Daniel replied, kissing the top of her head. You fought for it, for all this happiness. Yuna thought about everything she'd been through. The illness, the failed marriage, the fear, the loneliness. But she also thought about discovering her strength, finding true love, learning that sometimes the most painful things can lead to the most beautiful. It was worth it, she said softly. All the suffering was worth it to get here. And as the sun set over São Paulo, painting the sky pink and gold, Yuna knew with absolute certainty that she had found something more precious than restored health. She had found someone who saw her in her darkest moment and chose to stay, someone whose smile had the power to heal wounds that went far beyond the body. She had found love, true and deep, born from the ashes of despair and blooming into eternal hope.